It's been over 4 years since the Nintendo Switch Lite was released, and it's still one of the most popular handheld gaming consoles available. In this video, we'll go over how it holds up today and whether or not if this is the right console for you. Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. My name is Manny Ratal and we'll be talking about the Nintendo Switch Lite. Now, I actually did a full-out video review earlier this year. You can actually check it out right here, and we will be going over the technical specifications, but the focus of the video is to really hone in on why this console is still so popular in 2023 and after 4 years of its release, and how it's holding up. There's lots of questions about future consoles being released by Nintendo in 2024 and other handheld gaming consoles that have entered the market, so I want to touch on the pros and cons of that in this video. And guys, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay on top of all the videos I post on a weekly basis around tech and gaming. Now, before we jump too far ahead, I do want to talk about what the Nintendo Switch Lite is. So this is the Nintendo Switch Lite. It is a handheld console that was released by Nintendo over 4 years ago, and it is an alternate version of the original Nintendo Switch that was released way back in 2017. Now, although this console was released in 2019, 2 years after the original Switch, it still has all the same components and it's still running the same Tegra processor found in the original Switch. So there actually haven't been technical upgrades to any of the Switch models released over the past few years. Now, as the name suggests, the Nintendo Switch Lite is actually a very light handheld console. It weighs just over half a pound and you can barely feel it in your hands, and it's not something you're going to get tired playing. Now, it comes with a 5.5-inch LCD display and it is 1280 by 720p. So not exactly a 1080p resolution screen, but it's still good enough to play games on, and you cannot really differentiate pixels when you're playing at a reasonable distance. Now, if you're gonna zoom in and keep it right to your face, you will be able to pick up some jagged lines, but for the most part, the resolution is actually not a problem. The Nintendo Switch Lite comes equipped with 32 gigabytes of internal storage, but this can be expanded with the micro SD card. And even though the name applies Lite and a cheaper version of the flagship console, you still get access to the game cartridges, so this is not a digital-only console. On top of that, you get the standard stuff like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so you can connect your headphones wirelessly when playing, or you can use the 3.5mm headphone jack that Nintendo still decided to include, which is a huge plus. Now, in terms of buttons and ports, you still get the same things. You get all the regular buttons of a regular Switch, so you get the bumper triggers, the D-pad, and the 2 Joy-Con sticks, and you get a USB-C port for fast charging and data transfer. Now, what makes the Lite version of the Nintendo Switch very fun is the different colors it comes in. Now, this is in turquoise. I actually have another Nintendo Switch Lite in its coral, and you can get other colors like blue, yellow, red, and some limited edition versions. A lot more expandable, a lot more color options than the regular Switch or the OLED version. So if customizability and sticking out is your forte, then the Nintendo Switch Lite is definitely one of the consoles that does that. Now, I want to get into the important stuff and probably why you clicked on the video, and that is how does the Nintendo Switch Lite hold up after 4 years of its release, and we want to talk about gameplay first. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of technical specifications, the Tegra processor that's in the Switch Lite is actually the same Tegra processor that's in the regular Switch as well as the OLED version. So there's no gameplay and performance advantage across any of the Switch models. You're pretty much going to get identical performance across the board. That is good news. So typically, a light version of a console means there are going to be some pieces that are compromised in order to reduce pricing. But thankfully, Nintendo decided that this was not going to be one of the elements. So in terms of gameplay, all the games will run just fine. Personally, I really had no issues with a lot of the flagship games. You get between 25 to 30 FPS, which may not be a mind-blowing amount, but when you're talking about the games like Mario, Zelda, Metroid Prime, or even games like Assassin's Creed, you get a consistent 25 to 30 FPS, which really isn't that bad. Remember, this isn't a high refresh rate screen, so even games that do get up to 60 FPS and beyond, you're not really going to take advantage of it. Now, the saving grace as to why the Nintendo Switch in general is still so relevant 6 years after its release is that Nintendo necessarily does not push graphics and the cutting edge technology. They focus on gameplay and focus on having a pretty much good time. Now, some may say that this is a cop-out answer and Nintendo may not be doing as much as they would like to, but I think I agree with Nintendo's approach. They know what their target audience is, and they know that they like a certain subset of games like Mario, Zelda, Metroid Prime that is nostalgic and that's historical for Nintendo and Nintendo's fan base. and they want to make sure that when people play these games, they get the best out of it and have the most fun. So that means that, do they have to have it playing at 60 FPS? Do they have to have the best graphics? No. Ultimately, it all comes down to gameplay. And once again, the gameplay on the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch Lite is phenomenal to this day. Now, in terms of the game library for the Nintendo Switch, this is actually for its advantage of being released so long ago. It's over 6 years worth of development and gaming at your disposal. So if worrying about not having enough games to play for the Switch in 2023 or 2024 was your concern, you should just write that off. You have a pretty extensive library and catalog to choose from. Now, pretty surprising thing about the Nintendo Switch Lite is its durability. Out of the 3 Switch consoles you can get, by far this one feels the most firm, and for a reason. The Joy-Cons are not detachable. Because it's a single solid device, it feels great in your hands. Now, Nintendo's quality control isn't the best, so even with the standard Switch and the Switch OLED, the Joy-Cons, when locked to the screen, don't lock completely, and there is a little wiggle room and clickiness, which makes it feels cheap essentially. The Nintendo Switch Lite in your hands actually does not feel cheap, and it's not something that you feel like you would bend or anything. It's a very solid device. So it is a very durable device. There are some issues that I will talk about later on this video that spans across all Nintendo Switches, but in terms of durability and the build quality, it's actually very, very good. Now, in terms of the gameplay experience, I have to say it's been very, very positive just having this Switch in my hands. Now, although this is a very thin console, I never feel as if it's gripping into my palms or cutting into them. And the rubberized texture of the Nintendo Switch Lite here actually comes into my advantage and a lot of people's advantage. If your hands sweat during gameplay, you'll notice that with the Switch Lite, you won't have to worry about it slipping out of your hand, and actually play 3 to 4 hours nonstop on the Switch Lite without any issues or without my hands cramping. I have fairly large hands, but I still have no issues playing any of the games that are available on the Switch Lite or the Switch in general. Now, there have been a lot of positives I've said about the Switch and the Switch Lite, but there are some negatives, and I have to be honest with you, there are some pretty significant negatives that you should be aware of when purchasing this device. Number one is Joy-Con drift. So for those of you not familiar, Joy-Cons refer to these joysticks, and Joy-Con drift is essentially when your joystick gets off center, and essentially you'll have ghosting, meaning your character or your camera will start to pan without you even touching your Joy-Con because it's not calibrated properly or because of dust issues. Now, there is some good news to this. Not every single console experiences this. It depends on how rugged and how rough you are with your Nintendo Switch Lite. And Nintendo does cover it free under 1 year of warranty. So if you do get Joy-Con drift in the first year of your purchase, Nintendo will repair it for you for free. You pretty much only have to pay for the shipping that you send over to Nintendo. Now, that being said, one of the negatives about the Switch Lite is because the Joy-Cons are not detachable, you have to pretty much send in your entire device or have to get the entire device repaired. You cannot just simply pop on new Joy-Con controllers. So that is a pretty significant downside and something that you should be concerned about when purchasing this console. Now, another concern that I want to raise is the age of the Nintendo Switch Lite. Now, while the Switch Lite is technically just over 4 years old, released in September of 2019, the actual internal specs and the Tegra processor is from 2017. So it's 6 years old, technically speaking. And 6 years is around the time where major console companies like Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation usually upgrade their consoles. And there are always rumors that the Switch 2 or a new Nintendo console might be around the horizon. So if you're intending on purchasing this late into 2023 or early into 2024, just be cognizant that Nintendo may be shifting all of its resources and in development into the newer console, and newer games may likely not be coming out on the Switch when the new console arrives. Now, there is a downside that I want to bring up, and that is Nintendo's horrible online service. It's called Nintendo Online, but it's so limited in what you get and what you pay for. Now, compared to Game Pass and PlayStation Plus, the Nintendo Switch Online model does allow you to play online games and download certain games, but it's just so limited in its library that paying for it on a monthly basis or even paying for it up front really doesn't compete with Game Pass or the PlayStation Network. The problem with Nintendo Switch is even their comprehensive list of classic games from Sega, Game Boy Advance, and Nintendo 64, although they're there, you don't get the full library as you would for the Xbox and the PlayStation. So it's one of the things that's always held Nintendo back, and Nintendo really doesn't seem to care about it. But whether or not it was the Wii or the Switch OLED or the Switch, the online model and system has always been pretty poor. So if you are someone who likes to play games online and likes to game and download games online and likes to work off a subscription model, and you're used to Game Pass and you're used to PlayStation Plus, the Nintendo Switch Online will absolutely disappoint you. Now, another concern about the Switch Lite specifically is the battery life. The battery life simply isn't as good as the OLED versions or the original Switch. Now, depending on the game you're playing, whether it'll be a AAA title or even a game off of a Nintendo 64, you're not going to get the same battery life. I can get sometimes 3 hours of battery life if I push it, and depending on the brightness I play at it, but I do have to charge this more frequently than my Switch OLED. So if playing on long journeys without a charger in hand is something that you intend to use a Switch Lite for, then you may want to consider the OLED version or possibly other alternatives, because the battery life just simply isn't the best. And speaking of alternatives, there have been a number of handheld consoles that have been released since the Switch Lite came out 4 years ago, and the most prominent ones being the Asus ROG Ally and of course the Steam Deck. Now, these consoles are PC handheld consoles, meaning the primary intent is to play PC games, but you do get the option of emulation, and you can more certainly emulate Nintendo Switch games onto the Steam Deck. But the limited barrier here is that they are significantly more expensive. The Steam Deck costs almost 2.5 times more than a Switch Lite, so there is a greater upfront cost. So if you do intend on saving money, you want a handheld console that has been out in the market for a while and there's a game library to back it, and you don't want to pay too much money, then the Switch Lite is a console for you. However, if you want the best handheld console that is available in 2023 and late into 2024, then the Switch Lite definitely is not one of those. Now, to answer the question, is the Switch Lite still worth purchasing after 4 years of its release? I would say it completely depends on where you're coming from and what your goal is and intent is in gaming. Now, if you're coming from someone who loves Nintendo exclusive titles, you're more concerned of the gameplay and the fun and the nostalgia of Nintendo, and you're not really concerned about the cutting edge graphics, the Nintendo Switch Lite or the Nintendo Switch in general are still great purchases to be made late into 2023 and into 2024, because there's such a repertoire of games for you to play. Especially for those who haven't gamed in a long time, you have such an extensive library and you'll still have a wonderful time. However, if you're in the party of someone who wants the newest and the best games and you want to be able to play them at the best possible performance wherever you go, then the Switch Lite simply isn't for you. You want to focus on handhelds like the Asus ROG Ally or the Steam Deck, but if you're in that group, you probably already know and you probably weren't intending on purchasing the Switch Lite anyway. But if anyone is on the fence and you were thinking about the durability and questioning whether or not this will be worth it in a few years, I still think that at the price point that you pay for the Nintendo Switch Lite, which is $200 USD, significantly cheaper than other handhelds, is still so much great value for the money you pay for it. Now, I personally love my Switch Lite. Even with the Steam Deck, I'm going to continue to use the Switch Lite and play games on it. It's just such a great handheld device in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Will you be purchasing Switch Lite? Do you already have one? What color will you be getting it in? Put it in the comments below. But that's it for the video today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.